The steakhouse hummed with quiet chatter, forks clinking against plates, the scent of sizzling meat thick in the air. At a corner table, Clint Eastwood sat alone, enjoying his meal, his face as unreadable as ever. Even in his 90s, he carried the same quiet intensity that had defined him on the big screen for decades. His presence commanded respect, at least from those who understood who he was. Not everyone did. At a nearby table, a group of young men in their 20s laughed loudly, their phones propped up, recording their every move. One of them, Tyler, smirked as he glanced toward Eastwood. "No way, dude. That's Clint Eastwood? He's ancient," he whispered, loud enough for people to hear. His friend snickered. "Yeah man, I thought he died years ago." Tyler, always hungry for internet clout, saw an opportunity. He stood up, stretching dramatically, making sure his phone's camera caught every move. He sauntered toward Eastwood's table with exaggerated confidence, clearing his throat. Well, if it isn't Dirty Harry himself," he announced, voice dripping with mockery. He squinted, attempting an over-the-top impression. "Do you feel lucky, old man? Or did you forget your line?" A few chuckles rippled through the restaurant, but most people remained silent, watching. A couple in the corner shook their heads. A waiter froze mid-step. Clint Eastwood didn't look up right away. He took a slow sip of his drink, set it down with deliberate ease, and finally, his gaze lifted to meet Tyler's. The air felt heavier. "I see," Eastwood said, voice quiet but firm. "Another kid who thinks the world is his stage." Tyler grinned. "Oh, come on, old-timer, it's just a joke. Don't take it so seriously." Eastwood's lips barely curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You want a joke? Here's one." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on Tyler's. "You think you've got guts? You think you're funny? Let's find out." Tyler blinked. "Find out what?" Eastwood gestured to an empty chair. "Sit." For the first time, hesitation flickered across Tyler's face. His friends whispered behind him, still recording, urging him on. The whole restaurant was watching now. "What, you want to give me a life lesson?" Tyler scoffed, folding his arms. Eastwood simply tilted his head. "No. A challenge?" A few people in the restaurant exchanged glances. This was getting interesting. Tyler hesitated, just for a second, before laughing. "All right, what kind of challenge?" Eastwood took another slow sip of his drink, then set the glass down with a soft clink. "One that'll show you what real fear feels like." "What is Eastwood planning?" A murmur spread through the restaurant. A few people leaned in, eager to see what Clint Eastwood had in mind. Tyler, still riding on bravado, let out a sharp laugh. "Fear? From you?" he scoffed, gesturing toward the aging legend. "Come on man, what are you gonna do? Stare at me real hard." Eastwood didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady, unshaken, as if he'd heard it all before. He pushed back his chair with deliberate ease and stood up. Even at his age, there was something about the way he moved, slow, controlled, like a coiled spring that hadn't lost its snap. "You ever been in a real fight, kid?" Eastwood asked, voice calm. Tyler chuckled, glancing at his friends. "What, like a bar fight?" "Nah man, I don't waste my time on that." Eastwood nodded slightly. "Ever been face to face with something that could kill you?" Tyler's smirk wavered. "I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff online." Eastwood took a step forward. The weight of his presence alone seemed to shrink the room. "Let me tell you something, kid. There's a big difference between watching danger and standing in front of it." The smirk was gone now. The restaurant had gone dead silent. Even the waiter had stopped in his tracks, holding a tray mid-air. "All right," Tyler said, folding his arms. "So what? You got some kind of test for me?" A faint smile ghosted across Eastwood's face. "You could call it that." He turned toward the door, motioning for Tyler to follow. The crowd watched as Tyler's friends nudged him. The camera was still rolling, he couldn't back down now. "Fine old man," Tyler said, forcing a grin. "Let's see what you got." The two stepped outside, the cold night air wrapping around them. A small group followed, curiosity getting the better of them. A black SUV idled by the curb. A tall, grizzled man in a cowboy hat stood beside it, arms crossed. He looked like he'd been carved from stone. Eastwood gestured toward him. "This is Bill. He used to be a stunt coordinator in Hollywood. Spent years making sure guys like me didn't get killed on set." Bill gave Tyler a once-over and grunted. "This the kid?" Eastwood nodded. "Says he's got guts." Bill smirked. "We'll see about that." Tyler's confidence wavered for the second time that night. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" he asked. Eastwood's voice was quiet but sharp. "Stand still." "Stand still for what?" Tyler frowned. "Stand still? That's it?" Bill reached into the SUV and pulled out a long black case. With a practiced motion, he unlatched it, revealing a sleek, custom revolver nestled inside. The streetlights gleamed off the polished barrel as he lifted it. The color drained from Tyler's face. Whoa, hold on. What is this? Eastwood didn't move, his expression unreadable. You mocked me, kid. Thought it was funny to play the tough guy. So now, let's see if you can handle real pressure. Tyler swallowed. His friends, still recording, whispered excitedly behind him. A couple of onlookers gasped. This is insane, Tyler muttered. You can't just... Bill interrupted. Relax, kid. I've done this stunt 100 times. He held up a playing card between two fingers. I'll put this on your shoulder. I fire and the bullet goes straight through the card. You don't move. You don't flinch. Tyler felt a cold sweat forming at the back of his neck. And if you miss? Bill chuckled. I don't. Silence. Tyler's bravado was gone. This wasn't a joke anymore. He glanced at Eastwood, expecting him to call it off, to reveal it was all just a lesson. But Clint just stood there watching. Waiting. Tyler's friends kept whispering. Dude, you got this. Just don't move. His pride was at war with his fear. Backing out meant looking like a coward. But going through with it, that was something else entirely. Bill held up the card. Last chance, kid. You in or out? Tyler clenched his jaw. His heart pounded against his ribs. He had no choice. Fine. A nervous chuckle rippled through the crowd as Bill placed the card against Tyler's shoulder. Tyler stood stiff as a board, hands balled into fists at his sides. His breathing was shallow. Bill took 5 steps back. Cocked the gun. Tyler squeezed his eyes shut. Keep 'em open, Eastwood said. Tyler forced his eyes open. Bill raised the revolver. The night air felt colder. Then, bang. Tyler flinched so hard he nearly fell over. The card fluttered to the ground, perfectly split down the middle. His breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. The crowd erupted in cheers and nervous laughter. His friends whooped. But Eastwood just stared. You flinched, he said flatly. Tyler's hands trembled. His stomach twisted. He had never felt fear like that before. Bill smirked. Guess you ain't as tough as you thought. Tyler couldn't speak. And for the first time in his life, he didn't have a joke. What lesson does Eastwood have next? Tyler stood frozen, his pulse still hammering in his ears. The split card lay on the pavement, a silent reminder of how close he had just come to something very real. His friends cheered, clapping him on the back, but their laughter felt distant. Eastwood stepped forward, his gaze never leaving Tyler. You flinched? Tyler let out a shaky breath. Yeah. So what? You expect me to stand there like a statue while a bullet flies past my face? Eastwood tilted his head slightly. That's the difference between pretending to be tough and actually having guts. The crowd fell silent. Tyler's jaw clenched. Oh, come on, man. I did it. I didn't run. That's gotta count for something. Eastwood studied him for a long moment. Then, in a low voice, he said, Let me tell you a story. Tyler scoffed. A story? Eastwood ignored the sarcasm. Back in the early days before I was a household name, I did my own stunts. One time we were filming a scene with real explosives. No room for mistakes. No second takes. The crowd listened intently. The director gave us one warning. If you're not where you need to be when that explosion goes off, you're dead. Eastwood's voice was calm even. One guy on set, big talker, thought he was invincible, froze up at the last second. Didn't follow directions. The blast hit too close. He didn't walk away from it. Tyler swallowed hard. Eastwood's eyes darkened. That's what real fear looks like. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't give you time to prepare. It comes and you either hold your ground or you don't. A heavy silence settled over the group. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. So, what, you're saying I don't have what it takes, he muttered. Eastwood shook his head. I'm saying you don't know what it even is yet. Tyler frowned, but something in Eastwood's words hit deeper than he wanted to admit. Bill smirked and crossed his arms. Lesson ain't over yet, kid. Tyler blinked. Wait, there's more? Eastwood gave a slow nod. This was the easy part. Tyler's stomach dropped. The next challenge? Eastwood said, voice steady. It's not about standing still. It's about what you do when it's time to move. What is the next test, and can Tyler handle it? Tyler's pulse was still erratic, but he forced himself to stand tall. All right, he muttered. What's next? Eastwood studied him for a moment, then gestured toward Bill. The stuntman opened the SUV's trunk and pulled out a coiled rope. Tyler frowned. A rope? He asked. Bill smirked. This ain't just any rope, kid. It's for a classic Hollywood stunt, something actors used to do before CGI made them soft. Tyler watched as Bill fastened one end to a metal pole near the curb. Then, with a few practiced flicks, he tied a noose-like loop at the other end and let it dangle about 6 feet off the ground. This, Eastwood said, is called a running lasso stunt. In the old westerns, when a cowboy got roped, he had to time his movements perfectly, or he'd get whiplashed straight into the dirt. Tyler raised an eyebrow. And you want me to what? Get roped? Eastwood nodded. You'll run full speed. Bill will lasso you mid-stride. If you fight it, you'll hit the pavement hard. If you trust the rope and roll with it, you'll land on your feet. Tyler blinked. That's insane. Eastwood's gaze didn't waver. It's about control under pressure. You want to act tough? Show me you can handle a real fall without panicking. Tyler's throat went dry. His friends whispered behind him. The cameras were still rolling. If he backed out now, the internet would roast him alive. He took a deep breath. Fine. Let's do it. Bill tightened the rope, nodding. All right, kid. Sprint as fast as you can toward that street lamp. I'll take care of the rest. Tyler exhaled, shaking out his hands. He locked eyes with Eastwood, who simply nodded. Then he ran. The wind rushed past his ears. His legs pumped hard. The ground blurred beneath him. Then snap. The rope tightened around his torso. Instinct screamed at him to fight, but Eastwood's voice echoed in his head. Don't panic. Instead of resisting, he let the momentum take him. His body flipped through the air, then in an instant he landed on his feet. The crowd gasped. Bill let out a whistle. Even Tyler's friends stopped laughing. He was still standing. Eastwood nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Now you're starting to get it? Tyler caught his breath, his heart still hammering. For the first time he understood, this wasn't about stunts. It was about trust, respect, control. He turned to Eastwood, his voice quieter now. So, did I pass? Eastwood smirked. Kid, you just took your first real step. Tyler finally understands what it means to have real courage.